May curiosity lead our way. Enjoy.
Cool. Well, Tony, thanks
Yeah.
for coming on the podcast, man. It's good to see you again.
Oh, nice to see you too. We're recording right now. Hey, look at this. Let's go.
We just roll right off the top, and I just edit
Good.
in
I like it.
wherever I want.
I like it.
For everyone listening, how would you describe yourself to a room full of people who don't know you?
Well, man, yeah, you got some good questions loaded up. Hey, starting right off the hop.
Thanks, man.
So for me, man, I would describe myself as like a dad, first of all, dad, a husband, and then an entrepreneur. But I'm a former SWAT team leader. And right now, what I do is just help people to be, to gain their peak performance through, mental and physical fitness.
Mm,
And then that's me in a nutshell.
right. And you mentioned just before you opened a third gym. How long have you been doing that?
Yeah, so I've had the original garage gym opened about 9 years ago out of when we first moved into a brick and mortar from my house. And in 2017, we added the Kingsville location. So we have Amherstburg and Kingsville, which are in Essex County. And then we added Windsor almost 2 years ago to the day. I think we're coming up on our 2 year anniversary in about a month. And
Nice.
That's been a whole other challenge. We're outnumbered now. My wife and I are the only owners. We don't have investors here, right? It's just us. So they say, just like having kids, we're all of a sudden outnumbered by our children.
Yeah. And then, yeah, organization and management of them and cleaning
Yeah,
all the pieces,
yeah,
right?
yeah. You know what? Honestly, it's not the gym stuff. It's a broken machine here, or a light bulb's out there, or a door problem, or a snow removal. It's all those little things that you don't think of when you own a business that have been more of the issues that kind of like take my time or direct me in different ways.
They accumulate over time, right? And 10 minutes in each of them equates to be what, 2 hours a time because they're driving in between. And it's just, yeah, man, I can imagine.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. It's like, oh, you got a light bulb out in Amherstburg. You have this a bike needs to be fixed here. And sure, we have people for that, but I still have to delegate it out and it still gets done.
Absolutely.
But that was the learning curve for adding that third location for sure.
Nice. Now you mentioned, or I guess I knew this before, but you mentioned you were a SWAT team leader. Could you talk a bit about the path that's led you to where you are today?
Yeah, there was it's been a crazy path, I guess. About 1999, I guess the journey started. I became a police officer and worked my 5 years in patrol, kind of like that's really kind of where you have to start. Everybody starts there. And then moved on to SWAT in like '04. Became a SWAT team leader in a couple of years. I was a SWAT team leader well ahead of my time for who knows what reasons, but I guess the team just needed a little bit of change and a little bit of consistency. So instead of being this most senior guy, becoming the team leader, I was voted in by my peers and then took that role on for like 8 years.
Wow.
It was a wild ride and something I would never look back on. This gym would not exist if it wasn't for the skills that I learned in that position. Leading men, I say men because that's all we had at that point, leading type A men, right? Too, that were also older than me, senior to me, more experienced than me. I had to learn a different way to lead, and it couldn't just be through rank or control or authority. It had to be, more with kid gloves, more with like, I'm going in this as a learning opportunity. I need you to help me. And it really, really helped me along my way. And about then the garage gym opened. I was moved from SWAT. That's a whole long story. I was moved from SWAT. I wasn't too happy about it, to be honest with you. And I kind of said, you know what, during SWAT time, we were able to work out every single day in the gym as part of our shift. Well, that didn't happen in patrol anymore. And I would have to go in early to use the gym there. And I just started doing some stuff out of my garage, added some equipment. Some people started coming by my house. I was training them. I had some bunch of certifications, mostly from SWAT. And next thing you knew, they're like, hey, can I throw you a couple bucks? And the garage gym was born.
Yep.
And then 6 years ago today's Canada Day when we're shooting this. I'm not sure where it's going to air.
Yeah.
6 years ago today, I left the police department and went all in on the garage gym, and we've done nothing but grow since. Sure, I don't probably make as much money. My wife and I each giving up our police salaries, six-figure salaries.
Yep.
But man, the happiness and how I feel and the policing changed. It was a great job. It still is a great job, I'm sure, for some people. And God, is it necessary? But it changed too much for me, and I'm way happier here. And I think I've probably increased my health span and my lifespan, which is something I'm sure you understand.
Yeah, man, absolutely. Yeah. It's funny how do you think that being or growing older along that same timeline has helped shift that priority, or do you feel like it was more a natural curve of your career to kind of get out of that environment.
You know what? Had I not been shifted out of, I'll call it ESU is like what we call SWAT here. Had I not been shifted out of ESU, the picture behind me, I don't
Yeah.
know that any of this would have ever happened. So you talk about moments that you don't really anticipate, and I fought it, man. I fought it. I did not want to move,
Hmm.
and it allowed me to kind of like grow into that. And then, yes, for sure, maturing. I don't know. They say you go from like being the lion or the warrior to the father to the monk, and
Yeah.
or to the king, the emperor, whatever you want to say. And I'm kind of like in that shift, I think, between like king and emperor in my life right now,
Hmm.
or sorry, king and monk in my life right now.
Now that kind of leads, it's my perception of you that you are a guy that enjoys intensities, right? You get into policing, you go into SWAT, you're the leader, and you're in Windsor of all places. Not exactly a calm city in terms of policing, I imagine,
No, I mean
right?
one of the busiest cities per capita in all of Canada, including the big cities, Toronto, Montreal. We're a big little city here, man.
And
500,000 people, but our proximity to all those
exactly.
major cities in the United States really makes us busy.
And one thing I remember from before talking to you is, are you still the most tasered guy in Canada? Was it? What was that fact?
I definitely, at some point, I had tasered the most people, I'm sure.
Yeah,
And I don't know that anybody's ever been tasered more than me with all the courses I took and stuff. They used to be in the States, so it was a little bit more wild, wild west when you go on these courses.
yeah.
Now, of course, Canadian government's taking control of it, and maybe for the right, but regardless, I don't think people have to get hit with that thing as often as I used to.
Used to be. So, do you have any idea where that drive towards intensity would come from in your past, or do you know what that is in you that kind of keeps you in that? And even training, right? Training has an intensity, or whether it's the running and gunning or the men's courses or the gym, there is a certain degree of engagement with those activities.
Yeah, man. I mean, I love to take, I love that, like, that pump. I love that go, you could die. You're,
Yeah.
and that's kind of like something that the adrenaline from that has always been something. I think once you get hooked to it, you kind of chase. Like, even when I was a kid, I think it starts from my old man. Baseball, football, basketball. I was always like one of those kids who was like the hustle guy on the team, the guy who's diving for loose balls, the guys who's doing all that stuff. But my dad would take me on trips, and we would, leave my mom and my sister at the campsite, and we would go hiking, with very little, and go to the most, we'd be climbing and doing all these wild things. And it always gave me this like one, I always wanted to see what was over that next peak.
Mhm.
I'd be sitting in the campsite and I'd be looking out and wondering what was out there. And my dad would take me to explore it. And when you do that, when you get outside that comfort zone, when you do go and explore, and you don't know what's past that next peak, it is a source of adrenaline as well. And I think I've just always kind of chased that. And it comes even with opening the gym, and every time, like adding Windsor, as we talked about, that's also a form of adrenaline. It's also a form of like going after that next peak and trying to find out what's on the other side. And I feel like much more calm I am now.
Yeah,
Maybe it's
sure.
not, the danger's not there as my old job was had, but this is still, the financial stress, the stress to protect my family with my business that feeds us. That's the same in a lot of
Mhm.
ways. It's just that maybe it's not the gun, but it is the
Yeah.
slower death, I guess I'm looking at.
It's sort of that, pressure cooker to perform or to figure it out, like, it's the real time solution finding or creating, I guess, is kinda what it sounds like.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Do you find, like, looking back on that, do you feel connected to your dad still because of those things, like, in the new peaks and the different peaks that you're now sort of crossing and finding and continuing? Does that feel similar to when you were a kid, like, as a way to connect back?
Yeah, it does. It does. And
Yeah.
it makes me want to pass that same kind of gene on
Yeah.
to my boys, and like, hey, what's over there? Well, I don't know. We want to go find out. Let's go see.
Mhm.
And then whether that's through their, homeschooled education, or if that's through, traveling, or just having them see me do things that I don't know I can win.
Right.
Like, we're pretty open with them, and like, hey, like, the gym's not doing great. Windsor's been struggling. Like, when we first opened,
Yep.
and just making them understand that, I don't just do things knowing I'm going to win. And I also have a goal, but they're really witnessing me do the work between like where I am and where we need to be. And
Oh, I just paused. There we go.
You're good now.
Nice. Sorry, man. Internet troubles in Godrich, I guess.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I remember this Godrich. The internet has not improved, has it?
I did upgrade actually, so it's
Oh,
usually
attaboy.
pretty good. But one of the questions I ask everybody is, how would you describe your relationship with death? And I'm always very interested in the answers to this.
Well, my relationship with death. I'm not gonna lie to you, man. I'm pretty terrified of death.
Yeah.
You know, and as and maybe that's the driver to always survive when I do these things, and where you know, I really think courage is moving forward in the face of fear. You know, I hated jumping off buildings. And when I was, you know, I used to, every day that we did that, I wanted to call in sick, you know, because I am terrified of death. And I'm trying to do my best to get more comfortable with that and to kind of think about what death looks like for me so that I can make sure that I'm living the best for today.
Mhm.
And that's been what you said with the maturity thing. I know you're not much older than me, just a couple of years. And I think like that's where, you know, we kind of continue to kind of push a little
Yeah.
bit forward, right? Like,
Yeah.
so that for me, that's where it's at. Like, I wish I was more comfortable with it, but I also feel like it's my driver to go out and keep pushing towards that edge because I am that scared of that moment.
Right.
And, you know, not really, I don't know if I'm scared of the pain or if they're scared of the shut off. I'm scared of what I'm leaving behind and making sure that that's set in place.
Yeah. It's something every time I've been the closest to death, there's definitely a lot of adrenaline involved, right? There's no way to escape your aliveness in those moments. And that's one thing that's like, that's an intensity to bring it back that most people don't have a familiarity with, right? You don't know what that's like until you do. And it's not to
Right.
say good or bad or whatever, but it's like, if you've never experienced something like that, I don't know, I feel like your body adapts, things change, your perspectives change, and you either maladapt and go into, addiction and trauma and those kinds of things, or it's just like an expansion of
Yeah.
perspective of whatever. And it's just fucking wild, man.
I don't know if with you and I, if it's the same as maybe it is, but elongated because yours is like that medical. So when you're coming out of it, I'm sure you're like physically just absolutely beat up.
Yeah, you're fucked up usually.
My near death stuff, it's the day after, the evening after is the
Sure.
best. It's euphoric.
Yeah, oh yeah.
You're, you know, like I always say, like what SWAT guys do after one of these like crazy calls or some of the other experiences I've had in my life, which I'm sure we're gonna get into a little bit. But it's like we're allowed to swear on this thing, right? It's like,
Oh yeah, yeah.
like you're gonna drink, fuck, or fight. So
Yeah.
you know,
Sure.
all three of those can be good or bad. And it's like, yeah, I think that's where a lot of guys like me get themselves into trouble. And I have in the past as well. It's like that euphoric energy or that chasing of that, you can replace it with gambling, sex, drinking, like all the bad things, or you can use it to like build a business, to go out and
Yeah.
inspire a bunch of kids, to go do a
Yeah.
motivational speech, run the podcast, all these different things. It's your choice. It's like I always think that those emotions, those huge emotions, whether they're like a major loss, a major win in your life, it's like a slingshot.
Mhm.
When you pull that back and when you feel it the hardest, you got to let go at some point because that tension's too great. But where are you going to aim it?
Yeah.
And that's kind of like, you know, what I've been trying to teach my boys and the kids that I coach lately is like, hey, aim that emotion so it goes back and it doesn't break a window.
Yeah. No, that's a great analogy and very visual, right? It's like, yeah, don't aim it at your buddy's foot. Like the old pellet
Yeah,
guns. I
yeah.
remember stories from my parents and like my aunt and uncles and stuff, right? How many people got shot with pellet guns back in the 60s and 70s? Like, probably still have pellets in their legs.
Yeah.
Do you have any particular story or near death experience that comes to mind as like I don't know, a standout for you?
Yeah, and I'm sure anybody listening would expect me to go to policing for this, but I've got a couple. An encounter with a grizzly bear out west, which
Oh
was
wow.
like I had a grizzly. I was out mountain biking and came across the grizzly, and like I'm talking like from 10 feet away, and this
Ooh,
baby stood up. I thought life was over. I'll tell you that night I had a lot of fun. But the
sure.
one that really kind of stands out with me is I was in an airplane. And it maybe me hit harder because it was the bachelor party for my best friend who was like going to be my best man. And we were actually both getting married in those 6 month period. And we had the five guys that are all in my crew that I travel with still. We're all in this airplane. We're flying home and boom, the plane shakes. I look out my window and I was sitting towards the back of the plane by myself and my whole window is engulfed in flames.
Oh fuck.
So the plane is doing up and down and left and right, people are screaming, but nobody can see the fire because the plane was kind of empty and it's scooping under. The flame, I assume, is coming up and under and
Yeah.
flaming by my windows, right? And the people near me. So I go to the flight attendant who's on the phone now, and I assume with the pilot, I'm like, hey, the plane's on fire. And she's like
Yeah.
trying to shush me to sit down because she wants to deal with this emergency because the plane, and I'm like, the plane's on fire. And she goes, oh my God. Tells the guy he must have switched the gas off. I don't know, really know the technicalities behind this.
Yeah.
And then they say to me, like, hey, please don't tell anybody, but can you watch the engine? And I'm like, okay, I can do all that. Are we landing? And she's like, we're going back. I'm like, we've been flying for 2 hours. What do you mean we're going back? There's not an airport near here. No, we'll be fine. We're going back. So that landing, there was ambulances and fire trucks all over the runway, and us coming down in the plane because it only had one engine. Apparently they can fly like this, no problem. It just isn't like our normal like flight. It's
Right.
moving left and right, and people are crying because now they've said we're making an emergency landing.
Yep.
And that was one of the most surreal moments of my life. That just like, oh shit, like, and I remember being oddly calm. And I think that
Mhm.
comes back to my tie that back into policing was, being in a lot of crazy, stressful situations. In the moment of that storm, I feel like I'm very good or very practiced, one of the two, at
Yeah.
being calm. Whereas, I would not have been if I didn't have that experience. So being practiced and being calm. And then when you actually land that plane is when you feel that adrenaline dump. And maybe, with your trips to the hospital, in the moment, you're kind of like accepting,
Oh yeah.
and then later on, you feel that like, whew, that overwhelming, whether that's happiness, whether that's sorrow, you feel it so hard later on
It's
in the
just a
day.
release. Yeah.
Yeah.
I wonder too, like not being like there's nothing you can do in an airplane when you're flying around and catches on fire, right? So this your ability to release control when you know there's no control to be found is probably better than most people's because like that's my perception is most people will grasp to find something like what is the thing that I can hang on to that I can change and control and it's all me. It's like there are so many times in life that there is literally nothing, right? And
Right.
that's where I always go to breath. Always take a deep breath in through my nose since I was a little kid all the time, right? It's just trained into me. And that's like, this is it. Because otherwise, there's literally I just have to go along for the ride, whether that's in an ambulance or a bed or whatever, right? All the shit. It's like, can I take a breath? Sometimes it's no. It's like, okay, well, I was literally nothing. I just lay here and see what's up, right? But your ability to like make that judgment call, stay calm, watch the motor, no problem, and we just on for the
Yeah.
ride, man. Let's see where it goes.
I think it's like became like a situation of like really work over worry,
Mhm.
and service to somebody else. I think both play into that situation. And the grizzly bear. I was with a girlfriend at the time. This is a long time ago.
Yep.
And it was like in the moment, that grizzly bear stands up. It's freaking huge. And I grabbed my bicycle, I put it up over my head so I would look bigger.
Yep.
And I talked to her and said, this is a grizzly bear. Stay calm. Do not run. Let's
Yeah.
just back away slowly. And like, so I think like giving yourself a task, and my task was to watch that engine.
Mhm.
I remember this woman's face. This airplane's got to be 10 years ago. I remember this woman's face, and she's sitting with a little son, and she had seen the flames. And I'm telling her, we're gonna be fine. I talked to the pilot. A lot of it was bullshit. I didn't really believe it, but like
Yeah.
telling this lady, and just so having like serving somebody else and giving myself a duty keeps my eyes on the prize in the moment.
Mhm.
Whereas, later on when we landed, I was like, oh my God, like
Yeah.
freaking out. Like, when you
Yeah.
get down, same thing with that grizzly bear. The second that grizzly bear shot away in the woods, I had that adrenaline dump where
Oh,
my
yeah.
chain had come off my bike, and I could not
Yeah,
use
your
my
hands.
hand to get this chain back on. The girl I was with, she actually had to do it.
Mhm.
So I think she had the freeze in the moment, but then she had the withal to like be able to
Yep.
help us get out of that situation by putting the chain back on my bike. Pretty
Yeah.
wild, man.
That's crazy. Yeah, and yeah, because I think there's so much freedom in that. There's this realization of that was probably close to the end, or that one switch of decision, this would have been a completely different outcome, and like I wouldn't even be here, I guess, right? So yeah, that adrenaline dump. Have you found something in your life today to access that feeling still?
The adrenaline of the dump.
I guess both. Yeah.
I mean, a little bit. It's hard to match the adrenaline. That stuff comes. It's hard to hit that peak, I guess. And,
Yeah.
and maybe that's part of the problem. Maybe that's why I struggled a little bit for my first few years of being away from the job, was like, I feel like, I don't know, you're probably a good comparison to this. Like when you talk to somebody, their peak and your peak are the same from a mental standpoint, but your peak is like when you talk about actual circumstances. If I was looking at that from like an offensive coordinator or from like a bird's eye view,
Yeah.
yours is so much higher because you've had the paddles
Different.
attached to you, man. Like,
Yeah.
so your medical emergency versus somebody who broke their leg or got in a bad car accident,
Mm-hmm.
it's just not the same. But however, whatever you've experienced, the peak is, it feels the same for that. Does that make sense?
It
It
does.
feels
It absolutely does.
right. So like somebody's not getting not getting the memo done for their boss by Friday afternoon is their peak stress, whereas mine was like a dead child. Like,
Yeah.
but it just, they don't look the same from the outside, but I feel the same to that person. So I have a real hard time. God forbid, I don't want to get to that peak really ever
Mm-hmm.
again. It's probably going to mean a negative for me. But
Yeah.
there's been a time or two where I've had to step in and do something, to help somebody or in a situation where it's been there. But no, I don't honestly feel it. It's just slower buildups of those peaks, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
when it's like, oh, COVID, and we got to shut down the business. That was very similar, but it was a
Sure.
very slow and drawn out
Yep.
and very long. And that was a whole new learning experience too, which is something you deal with because you deal with your health all the time, I guess, is
Mm-hmm.
it's like I'm always kind of teetering on that peak in business, right?
Yeah.
Does that
It
make
never
sense?
goes
Whereas
away.
mine were like very spike and boom down, right?
Mm-hmm.
Very spike. Okay, we win the situation, we lose the situation, it's back down.
It's like there is no peak now. Sometimes it's like a prairie almost, or a flatland, where you just got to keep on walking, even though there is no
Right. That's a
what do you
good
call that?
analogy.
Um, crest or whatever. I forget the
Right.
name on Mount. I'm not a fucking climber, man, but you know what I mean. I always describe it as your
We're
10
really
isn't
trying to
my
push
10.
these metaphors. We don't have the words
No,
behind
I'm losing. I don't know if it's the time of day or just a long weekend or whatever, but
it.
it's yeah, everybody's got a different 10. And internally they are often quite similar. It's the
Yeah.
underlying experiences. And that's honestly in the speaking I've done and different things. It's like I've had to try to train myself because for most of my life, I tried to find someone that could relate on a similar level. It's like the experience and the details are so different. I still feel isolated and alone because there's nobody that can relate. Right. Whereas the shift in the last, say, 5 years or so has been into, why am I looking for someone who can relate to the details? Like it's the underlying human experience that we're all experiencing out here together. And yes,
Absolutely.
there is a difference in the intensities, and that's still, it's not a one-to-one comparison, but it's like, well, why am I comparing? Like, yeah, and that's been the
Yeah.
lesson to myself is don't look for the comparison, look for the humanness, look for the connection. And that's been a big shift for me. And it's been more helpful, I guess, because I can see the human in someone who is like, they're really fucking struggling from their broken leg or from, whatever the thing is. It's like, I know that feeling too. And so the compassion and the grace, and it's like, it's projection a lot of the time, right? The things that people are upset about, or the things someone, says, you're such a fucking dick or whatever, or why you saying that? Like, okay, that gives me a glimpse into where they're at right now. Right. And it's maybe
Yes.
not about me because usually it's, well, obviously there's interpersonal relations and things, but a lot of the time it's their inner experience that's just trying to come out.
Yeah. The struggle for me, and you hit it on the head there, is everybody's 10 is kind of feels the same internally. When somebody would express their 10 to me in the past, it would be like a 1
Yeah.
on my scale, especially when I was like still active in that world. And it was like, man, I have no interest in this. You sound like such a fucking baby,
Yeah.
suck it up. Whereas like now, and maybe this is a maturity thing, maybe this is just a needing to kind of like, accept who I am and be a better person. Like there's so many, like I don't know what the
Yeah.
moment is, but it's that like now, like what makes you uncommon is your ability that you have done these things and you can shed perspective and support to people in a different way. And now it's like I see those like those what I used to call lame stories or as
Yeah.
like opportunities for me to like help this person to grow.
Mhm.
And so, I find that like for me, and I think you can probably relate to this too, is somebody really challenged me, what makes you uncommon? And it's me. I've able to take all these dark, terrible moments that I experienced and reflect them now in a positive.
Mhm.
Whereas I used to take those and I really would internalize and it would make me more pissed. And I
Mhm.
wasn't, and I feel like me 5 years ago and me now are nowhere the same person. And for a good reason.
Yeah, man. And not by accident, right? It's not a passive thing to make that transition and change internally. That's definitely it's an
Yeah, a lot of hard
active.
work.
Yeah, man. Yeah, and it's nice when the payoff actually shows itself, right? When it's showing the improvements over time. It's that in itself is nice too.
Absolutely.
I'm wondering
Absolutely.
more of like an abstract question is what voice do you listen for when you're seeking guidance on your path? And kind of some people think in terms of consciousness or your partner or God or, how do you ground yourself or center yourself to move forward in the next step?
For me, it's nature. I've never been a God person in a
Mhm.
true form, I guess, or traditional form. Do I have faith? Yes. Nature's always been the spot for me to go.
Mhm.
And nature sometimes right now, like living where I live, is sitting in my front yard looking out at the water. It's a busy highway in front of me, but I seem to be able to really just ignore that and stare out at the water. Or even sitting in my backyard where I swear I have like maybe 20 yards of actual woods. But for me, that's like a very private spot to go. I'll go back there and I'll chop wood. I
Mhm.
chop wood way more than I ever have fires.
Sure.
And it's my moment to kind of like step away. I think I really really need to be alone when I get overwhelmed.
Mhm.
Some people need other people. I think my form of business and my form of like path and my it's always been so many people coming in. When you're a policeman, you meet 100 people a day, right? In
Yeah.
this gym, there's 100 and something customers a day that come through here. I'm not lacking in support. I have it, man. I have it. I'm grateful for it. But sometimes when I'm overwhelmed, I go to be by myself and I try to do it in a real quiet space and maybe counterproductive. I a cigar for some reason. I
Yeah.
think it comes to the breathing. I think the cigar and the breathing go hand in hand. I think it forces me. I'm not one of those people who can put a cigar in my mouth and do work. I have to
Yeah.
actually sit down
Sit.
for an hour with myself, no phone.
Yep.
And that's where I listen to, my voice. It's my voice. Is it a
Yeah.
higher power? Maybe. Is it the universe? Maybe. I don't have all that stuff figured out. I've been really
No.
working hard on that lately too, to figure out what I need to do to kind of take myself to that next level, I guess, of having something other outside of this world that I believe in.
Mm. Yeah, and my mind goes to stillness. You find the stillness to be able to listen. As you said, no phone, no it's just I need to disconnect for a second and just check in.
Yeah, my wife used to when we travel quite a bit, and it's not like typical travel. And she would always kind of think something was wrong when we travel because
Right.
I'd be so much quieter than usual. Even we got a cottage trip coming up, and man, there's days where I don't know if I say 25 words.
Mhm.
That's just me at complete peace. I
Yeah.
don't need to say much. I just like to take it in. I like to watch and listen to my sons laugh and play in the water with their friends and
Mhm.
and the sounds of the loons and whatever. It's just something
Yeah,
for
man.
me. I get super quiet when I need to and when I need to step away.
Yeah. It's is water a thing for you too? I find I can't swim, right? But I like to have my feet in water, whether that's the lake or the river or stream or whatever. I love walking into a little creek and just standing there or walking around a little bit. There's a different thing happens and I don't know what it is, but I love it.
I love the trees, man. The wind.
Yeah.
The
Okay.
wind in the trees. That noise of the wind in the trees is my big one.
Uh-huh.
I do enjoy looking at water, but I don't like being on boats. I don't like being on like
Yeah.
in big waves. I'm a big fan of being on land looking at water or yeah, knee deep,
Yeah.
chest deep, I'm
Yep.
good. But
Yep.
swimming I can swim, but I'm not swimming out to I'm
No.
not swimming across the lake, that's for sure.
Every night I've said it 1,000 times probably, but every night I take my dog out and where I am, there's no traffic on the road, right? So I let him run around just sniffing the bush and whatever, and I listen, I stand up, I stare at the sky, I talk to the sky, and I shut my eyes and listen to the wind in the trees every night. Some nights there's crickets, some nights there's not. Some nights there's frogs and, the noises, but I intentionally listen for new sounds that I can hear for a minute or 2 with my eyes closed, and I'll, like, listen, is it on the left side or the right side, and where is it coming from, and then what else is down there? It's just I don't know where the process came from, but it's been It does. It kind of calms me down or like really centers me for bedtime. Like, okay, well, that's today. We'll see what tomorrow brings. And it's bedtime.
It's awesome.
Yeah, man. I mean, I highly recommend it if anybody has the ability to do that. It's just like that release of the day and curiosity for tomorrow.
Absolutely.
I'm wondering what comes to mind when you think about a time in your life that you felt most alive? And I'm guessing there's a few of them.
Most alive.
Yeah.
Oh man. Are you looking for like a specific event or a greater? I mean,
Any
I think when felt most alive was the transition between, and maybe it's not the most, but at this point, the one I can remember the most
Mhm,
is the transition between SWAT into patrol and patrol into this gym, because it
mm,
all kind of jumbled into one. And it was all very connected into one. I went from SWAT where I was working with 18 guys that I knew. I mean, I knew their wives, I knew their parents. You just knew them so well. That's all the only people you worked with,
mhm,
hand selected, and well trained, and spent every minute together. You That job sounds so crazy, and everybody thinks it's so wild and dangerous, but man, patrol, those patrol guys and girls, what they do on a day-to-day basis is insanity.
mhm.
When I moved from SWAT into patrol, the adrenaline charges I was getting on a daily basis was I wasn't like a lot of times in SWAT, we know where we're going to for the most part. We've planned, we know we were coming to your house and you're the target and this is the house. And sure, there's gonna be things we didn't plan for, but we're so planned that the small wrinkles don't really affect you. In patrol, you know nothing. You get this little
Yeah,
tidbit of information called from somebody across the street who probably doesn't even want to talk to the police, is given the minimal amount of information possible. You're getting it through a dispatcher. So now it's like we're also
yeah,
playing the telephone game, because as good as those dispatchers are, there's going to be some information lost. And we're going. And it's
mhm.
me and this guy I just met yesterday,
Yeah,
that's in my
yeah,
car, that's having a coffee. And we're trying to figure it out. So that, and then coming home from all that wildness, not sleeping, having the two little boys at home, and trying to put this together, and having people largely depend on you. They're investing in me, they're
yeah,
paying me membership, and trying to deliver on all ends, man. And it was all working.
yeah,
I was doing these great things in patrol. We got so many, like in patrol, in the little time I was back, um I had more wild calls, more things that would be like hero type stuff,
yeah,
and witnessed, not just me, witnessed hero type stuff from people that was just like this, so rewarding all the same time, and watching this business grow from that passion, from 20 people in my garage to quickly 100 people in this building, and then another 50 people, which has grown into another 100 people in another building, another 50, it's just been wild. And that part, that reward of watching all of that hard work, where I felt like I was working 18 to 20 hours a day
yeah,
to grow and succeed to the point where I could 6 years ago hang up my gun belt forever and
mhm.
still support the police in my own way. And is that was where I felt the most alive. I guess it's not really a one moment, it's really a 4 or 5 year moment,
Yeah,
but man,
yeah,
it feels good.
yeah. It's kind of that extended, I don't know, yeah, work period for the payoff. It's the that we're gonna either gonna sink or swim.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. That's Do you have a next step in that plan? Like, not to share business wise or whatever, but like, look, thinking of the next 5 years, do you have that sort of stuff? I think you've been working with a business sort of planning someone.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm curious, are you feeling equally as excited for the next 5 years, like to kind of change that aliveness or to continue it and let that grow as well?
Yeah, the next 5 years, I do, and I have been. I was up in New York City just a couple weeks ago,
Oh, nice.
laying stuff out for my 5 year plan, and it's just about creating a little bit more structure,
Mm,
so that I do have the opportunity to make decisions over the next 3 to 5 years. Right now, and it's not about disclosing too much about the business. It's one business. The garage gym is one business,
mhm,
and Danny and I remain the sole investors, no partners, no nothing.
mhm.
However, it's all under one hat.
Yep.
I need to separate those a little bit, so that it does give me a position, an exit strategy in 5 years, 10 years, nowhere
Yeah. Yeah.
close. But or even not even an exit strategy, an ability to kind of taper down to not work, when I'm,
Yeah.
in 10 years, I'll be 55 years old. I don't think I'm going to want to, or be able to maybe get
Yeah.
up every single day at 5 a.m. and be in here, coaching the bench press like I do right now. So my plan in the 5 years is to structure that so that I have opportunities to say like, hey, you know what? This guy who works for me is great. You want to buy 50% of this? This
Yeah.
location? Do I want to franchise them? Do I
Yeah.
want to just continue to roll how it is? But regardless, having a little bit more structure so I can pull out numbers a little bit easier and know that, hey, like, Kingsville's making a ton of money. Amherstburg's losing money. I really, at this point, I just know the garage gym and how we're doing. I don't know it as an A, B, and C, how we're operating.
Sure. You'll have the ability to delegate more if you want to, right? It's
Exactly.
the more time freedom if you want to, and that kind of stuff, right? That
Yeah, and
sounds,
delegate and pay some of my people a little
of
bit
course,
differently. Like,
of
hey, like,
course.
you've been here a long time, and now we can reward you based on, you're kind of controlling gym A,
Yeah.
and instead of giving ownership where people would have to buy into,
Yeah.
and maybe my people are not in that position to do that, maybe they are, or it's like, hey, like, I can give you this ownership based on, the performance of the place. So you do better, we do better,
Yeah.
everybody does better, right? Everybody should be
Yeah.
happier. And I do want to set up some of the key players that have been with me for a long time that have sacrificed the same way I have. And the
Mhm.
sacrifice for something they don't own is insane to me. And I appreciate that so much. So I really am spending a lot of time trying to figure out how I can make life better for them the next 5 years.
I think that's one of the characteristics of, like, I don't know a lot about CEOs, but that's really a true community mindset. It's a true CEO and business. I think it's if you, well, it's the same thing I believe to be true across any community. If the individuals in a community thrive, the community will thrive, right? And so if you have the ability to, what can I do to help the individuals of my business thrive? You in turn, it's just a byproduct. Like, of course, you'll do well too. So think, instead of thinking, how do I do well? You're thinking, how can I help them do better and, be more vibrant in their life, be more excited about everything. It just trickles down into the world in general.
Yeah, and it trickles up, like you said. Like every
100%.
time in my time in business, and I've tried to do one of these like get rich quick schemes, for lack of a better word, doesn't work. It attracts the wrong people into this place. It's not good. When I actually look at it like, hey, like what do these people want and need?
Mhm.
And sometimes those aren't meshed, and that's my job as a coach here, and my team is to like not necessarily give people what they want, but give them what they need, but
Mhm.
make it enjoyable to get, to do so,
Yeah.
right, for
Yeah.
them, so that they keep coming. Because like, if sure, I know if we bench pressed every Monday for the next 20 Monday or 35 Mondays or 52 Mondays, the
Mhm.
bench press would go up way up. Are people going to get bored of that? Probably. So we have to figure out, kind of the balance in between that.
Yeah.
And every time we focus on doing that, like giving people what they want with a mesh of what they need, a more of a priority on what they need,
Mhm.
and maybe bundling that in something they want, business goes great.
Sure.
Our 6 week transformations, like it's not like a diet program. It's really like we really only we don't even really put that many people in a deficit anymore. But it's really what they want and need. And what do they want and need? A little bit more accountability, a little bit more fun.
Yeah.
And man,
Yeah.
and the people get great results. And what happens when we get great results? Sure, the sales go up here, right? Which
Sure.
is, helps everybody.
Yeah. Referrals are always going to be your number one, like, driver. I think,
Yeah,
like,
for sure. I
if
mean, most
everyone's,
of my business comes in through our customers, not through my marketing. I'll tell you that.
mhm. No, I mean, it's beautiful. It's the only way to do it if you're able, well, not if you're able to, if you have the wherewithal to think about it. I mean, yeah, I love that, man. I mean, it's a similar question to before, but I feel like it's maybe going to be a different answer. I have these things I call movie moments, and I'd love to hear a story about a moment or a time in your life that felt like you were living in a movie.
Oh, okay. So for me, there was I'm gonna try to put the year on this. I don't know. Probably within the last 10 years for sure.
Mhm.
I was by then a seasoned SWAT team leader, and we have been doing a lot of work with Toronto, because Windsor being in the border, for anybody who doesn't know, Windsor's in the border, the armpit of Canada, right? Um, linked to Detroit, but we are situated between Chicago, obviously Detroit, Toronto, Montreal, and a lot of those southern states. So like a lot of guns come through this border here. in exchange for drugs, or usually not vice versa. It's usually that's the way it goes. And so we're having a major problem. We're doing a lot of work with Toronto, and Toronto had organized this huge project. You know, the size of Toronto, the city of Toronto.
Yeah.
And we decided we're going to do something like 80 doors and one day, 80 doors. And so
Wow.
Toronto basically gets any team they can to go there. But a lot of the doors, like I think like 25 or 30 of the doors are being done here in Windsor, Essex County. So I'm tasked with leading all that. Well, 50 doors are happening in Toronto. We have to like pretty much do these in like as in sync as possible. And we're probably all going to have to do multiples, but we're going to try to make the higher priorities are all going to happen at say 4:35 a.m. On whatever X and Y day. It was a summer day. I remember that. And so I had access to, I think 5 or 6 teams came down here from all over Ontario. So all the teams from Ontario who normally do not work together, are all working together, trying to get everybody on one radio system. You can imagine the amount of work that went into this project, the amount of communication. And I remember I'm all camouflaged up, which was not typical of what we do here because we do so much urban. Like we're not really out, like where you guys are. And the teams out there are always putting camouflage and sneaking around the woods. But we're out, and I remember it's like an absolutely hurricane summer, humid Windsor summer downpour here. I'm camouflaged up. I've got a gun slung on my back. We've cut through a bunch of fences, and we're hunkered down in this like woods, and we're waiting for 52 teams or 52 doors or something like that, whatever it was. I think it was like 30 doors at once. All these teams to get into place. And I'm listening to all the teams check in, and they're saying like, we are, and they'd say their code, this unit, and we are basically like green light. We're green, a yellow light is what they're saying because they're waiting for the green light from us.
Yep.
And I'm like, man, I am in a movie. It's like I'm getting bit by mosquitoes. I'm looking at these dudes around me that are just like so professional, so ready to do this work. And the second I say go, we are going to be going for the next 6 hours, busting down doors and locking people up. And I remember when every team checked in and I looked around, I took a deep breath and I basically said, okay, all teams on my call, basically without giving out the code words, but 1, 2, 3, go.
Yep.
And then boom, the excitement around that and thinking of like, holy shit, this is my life, man. And like, that's the stuff like, man, had I had some of the rules change, maybe I'd still be there. It's all for the best now. But man, if I could go back for one day, I don't want to go back, but if they needed it, they were short people or something, they needed one day, man, I'd love to go and do that again. Cause that was my movie moment, was sitting in those woods in the high humidity, getting poured on, thinking like, man, I am so fucking happy to be here. You're sitting in the shittiest conditions, but I'm so happy to be here. I wouldn't want to be anywhere else in the world right now, but here at work. And that's awesome. And I get that a lot at the gym where I'm like, I would not want to be anywhere else in the world, but here at work. And I think that's when you've made the right calls in your life.
Yeah, man. And that's fucking wild, right? Like you're sitting in a bush getting soaked. And when you say green means go, and you wouldn't have the time to think about it, I'm sure, but exactly what's happening in 30 other places as you're moving. It's like the synchronicities across everything. And like, this is fucking, there's a lot of people about to have a bad day and they don't know it yet.
Yeah. Yeah. And listen to the check-ins after, like, residence A secured, residence B secured, and then saying, okay, everybody move to phase line 2, which is like our next set of doors. And we went till probably start at 2 a.m. and we went till about 4 p.m. that day. And, I tell you, there was a good party that night. That was a good party that night.
Yeah. To bring it back around.
Drinking days. We had a lot of fun.
Sure. Yeah. The, what was the 3 F's or the drink, fuck, or fight or whatever?
Yeah. It's, there's something about a bunch of men and the adrenaline and then the aftermath of that. And just like, slapping 5 with somebody who just did something outstanding and meeting up with the other teams who came all the way here and trusted in me. Doing work in other cities is hard because you don't know. It's just things are laid out differently. Houses are laid out differently. Neighborhoods you don't know. Streets you don't know. It's very unnerving, right? And just that like that bro hugs after and the slaps on the back and shots here and there and just that night it was just hang out. I mean, the fuck was it was each other.
Yeah.
in the not the literal sense.
Yeah.
It was like just the enjoyment of being together with a big win.
Yep, the camaraderie and absolutely a different kind of connection because I imagine similar to some military stuff where the only people who understand what it's like are the people who were actually there with you, and they were all in one room celebrating, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, man.
Absolutely.
Kind of to take a little bit of a shift on things, what's been one of the most difficult but important lessons you've learned in life so far?
Difficult but important. Man, is that it's it's me. And I know people talk about the leadership books and Jocko and all these things, but we talked about being at parties and having people, good people come up to me and say things. And I'd be so annoyed and be laying so much judgment on them. And at a
Mhm.
certain point in my life, everything and everybody pissed me off. Nobody understands what I'm doing.
Yep.
You know, nobody appreciates what we're doing, which, you know what, looking back, that means that we were doing it really well because my mom and dad and your mom and dad and your brothers and sisters, my sister, my friends, they should all not have to worry about the things that I had to see.
Mhm.
They should not have to worry about those people. If I'm doing the good job, they don't even know that world exists.
Mhm.
And I should have taken that as a compliment. And I remember coming home from an event. I talk about this a lot. And my son, I was always angry at everything. And my son, who was at the point just 3, my youngest, Braun, looks up to me. He's like, Dad, why are you always yelling at me? We're such good boys. And I'd always found a way to kind of justify there was the other
Fuck.
people that were making me feel like this.
Mhm.
But when my son, who has nothing but good in him, any 3-year-old,
Yeah.
especially mine,
Yeah, sure.
but looks up at me and says that, it's like, man, you're right. You are a good boy. Why am I mad at you? Why am I
Mhm.
yelling? And it's like, man, it's me. There's things inside of me that need to get handled
Mhm.
that, I've seen or I've done or I've let go of that need to be dealt with. And so that was the hardest lesson. But man, that little boy saying that to me on that day literally changed my life. And I don't know where I'd be had I still lived with that kind of stress, that balled up anger and
Mhm.
and the emotions and all the shitty things I did because of it, and because of me, not because of anybody else, because I wasn't dealing with my shit. So
Mhm.
that for sure to me is the moment, the lesson learned that it is me and how I handle everything, and how I handle it and how I put it out is up to me. And that's where that we talked about the circle all the way back to the being uncommon, where now I'm taking that stuff, not always, I'm not perfect at this, I still got work to do, taking in that negative stress and putting it back out into the world, like filtering it, right, and
Yeah.
sending it back out. That slingshot, now I'm not throwing it at my,
Yeah.
not shooting my own family with it, no, not shooting
Yeah.
my friends with it, I'm not breaking the neighbors windows with it. I'm putting it out there to be a positive.
Mhm. It's kind of that process of transmutation, I think it's called, or alchemization maybe, where you're just taking in the negative and putting it back out as a positive. It's like a breath, right? You bring in the oxygen, you exhale the O2. It's yeah, whatever that process is called.
That is a good
What's
analogy.
what's the oh thank you. On the fly. What does that work look like? Like what have you found have been the biggest drivers of that change or the biggest help for you specifically?
Well, that moment with my son,
Yeah,
before that, so I was like, okay, open a business. It's my job that infuriates me.
sure.
Open a business, quit the job, not wear the uniform anymore.
Yeah,
It was like I'd done all these things, and prior to that, really focusing on my health. You would think like as a SWAT guy, you're always into health, but I mean, there was a lot of drink, there's a lot of things that were getting in the way that.
of
So
course.
really prioritizing health, and then doing meditation. What? Blah, blah, and
Mhm.
I'd done all these steps up to then and still hadn't really dealt with the one thing, which was, anything I had internalized. So I went out and I got some real professional help.
Yeah, okay.
I went to a psychologist, and this maybe is not for everybody, but something I needed to do.
Mhm.
And it worked for me hugely.
Yeah,
Is there still, there's still cleanups, there's still check-ins that have to happen. There's still times where it's like you got to get in there and clean off the rust a little bit.
absolutely.
But man, that is what it was for me. I went and I did all these things, and now I continue to do more things. I stopped drinking 6 months ago because it was like I was like, man, why you start to like just be more in touch with when you're feeling that way.
Mhm.
And I was like, okay, like I feel shittier more often when I'm drinking. I treat people, maybe not when I'm drinking. I was never a mean drunk, but the days leading after it where I'm
Yeah,
like, I'm not myself. And realize that, okay, like I got to keep leveling up, right? It's just like in the just like in, you know, I like to relate to fitness. You and I both understand that world very well. It's
Mhm.
like, you know, if we're not just adding a quarter a pound onto that bar every couple of weeks, we're always just lifting the same weight. Gravity, which is our age, you
Yeah.
know, and the stress of a life is going to pull you down slightly by doing things the same. So I just keep trying to add a little bit onto that bar. You know, now when I feel like drinking, I go out and I read a book, which is like
Yeah.
so funny. Like now when I'm stressed, I go read,
Right.
because I know that it brings me down quick and that kind of stuff. So it's adding that layer all the time.
It's kind of more tools to change your state kind of thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And replacing bad with good. I think that's a good one. It's like, okay, it's one thing, stop eating chips every on the weeknights. Okay.
Mhm.
But if you stop eating chips and replace that with another serving of protein,
Yeah.
your, you know, your body weight or your
You're doing
muscles are all
better.
going to improve.
Yep.
Right. So like don't just stop drinking. What am I in the moments where I feel like drinking? What am I gonna do?
Mhm. You
You
need
know, I'm
something to
gonna
replace it with.
right and make that a positive. So now you've taken away a negative and added positive. So you're +1 instead of even.
Yep.
Right? If hockey the playoffs just ended, right? You want to be your plus minus. You want the plus minus to be as the most in your favor as possible.
Absolutely. I guess what do you do with that anger now? Like, do you feel like it's still there, or do you feel like the therapy and the different things like that have really helped sort of dissipate that in your body?
Man, sometimes I feel like I don't have enough of it left in me. You
Yeah,
know,
right.
like, you know, and I think that's with age and too, you know what I look at we like to talk about Joel. I look at you know, his Instagrams like they kill me and it reminds me of me, but I don't have a lot of
Yeah.
that like need to go to battle anymore, you know, and need to, you know, maybe have people hear that I don't agree with them. Like now I don't agree with you. I either unfollow you
Yeah.
or I'm just okay with not agreeing with you. So like that kind of stuff. So I don't have the anger I once had. And whether that's, you know, that's me getting older or me not having the shit that I, you know, used to carry along with me, or
Yep.
just having the joy of having these boys around me all the time and my wife, it's stuff like that.
Sure. Yeah, maybe a a different or a change in perspective of gratitude, perhaps. Right? It's the things that um energy flows where attention goes, and your attention is on different things.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that I definitely don't know Joel Sankey. Don't take it that way. The guys
No,
want
no,
to kill
no.
me. But no, like, you know what I'm saying? With like,
Yeah.
I
The
don't have
intensity,
the
it's a different kind
yeah,
of
the
like,
intensity is different for me
yeah.
these days. And
Yep.
I love seeing that in younger men. I love to like pulling that out of younger guys around here, the
Yeah.
warrior mindset. And but you know, I've fought in the battles now, and now it's my turn to help others fight their
Right.
battle
Right.
through my experience and whatever you want to call it, wisdom. I don't know if that's the right word, but yeah.
Yeah, man. It's the wisdom gleaned from life. Like, you have lived a life, right? And continue, but like that wisdom comes from experience. And people, well, as you said before, it's if you are doing your job to the best of your ability, the people around you won't know anything about it.
Right.
It's kind of
Yeah.
that, like, I will take, well, honestly, with my health stuff, it's something I've shifted in, actually, in therapy as well. But I've always thought, I'm glad that it's me and not them, right? But instead of that, shifting that to, I'm just glad it's not them, right?
Yeah.
So am I glad that it's me? I'm like, I mean, sometimes, but not all the time. It's more of a fact of like, I will take it on uh in hoping that they don't have to.
Right.
Yeah.
And but I mean, and you talk about therapy, and it sounds so like much more than it is. At the end of the day, it's just a couple of people talking. And
Yeah,
I'm
man.
sure I'm not to dismiss what my
No.
psychologist did for me and the tactics he probably employed. But
Yeah.
at the end of the day, I was just sitting in a room
Like,
having
what
a chat
happened?
with a guy who gave me a different perspective,
Yeah, man.
which is like, you know, it doesn't have to be like, I mean, I recommend it for if you've really suffered, but like just
Yeah.
getting out and having conversations like this with other people who have similar, you know, like we've experienced similar stresses in different areas of the world, which means that you have a different perspective that you can help me with, and I for you. And I think that's important. And you know, and you talk about what have we said about getting old and those guys, and like I talk with DeFazio on the podcast about this all the time. My podcast, he's always looking about how he's going to grow and how it's going to get bigger. And I'm the opposite. I'm like, I want to figure out how to get things simpler. And I think that like, if you're going to summarize him in his mid 30s, me in my mid 40s,
Yep.
that's it.
Yeah.
I'm trying to simplify and he's trying to grow. And I bet you in 10 years, he's going to be doing the very same thing. And hopefully he's grown everything so that he can simplify and get to where he wants to be.
Absolutely, man. What's as you look into the coming weeks and months, what are you feeling most excited about?
Oh man, I'm like super excited to get this roadmap laid out for my employees and for
Mhm.
myself, so I have some clarity. But I
Mhm.
really feel like they've been here, and we are really growing pre-COVID, and so many of the things I had said happened. And then I feel like since COVID, it's been like, okay, we just got to get to here and we can do this. Just got to get here and we can do this. And we really haven't taken action. We've done so much, but we haven't really taken as much action to get some of the things done for them that I want to do. So I'm really excited for that in the next 2 to 3 months.
Mhm.
And for the I've really been hammering out my personal stuff again and back into kind of coaching more people in my TAC Life program, which is like my
Yeah.
one-on-one strength. I mean, anybody, this, as long as not everybody, some people are better than others, but really people to get you stronger and leaner. It's not rocket science, but I
Mhm.
think where I'm going to be able to help people more is like get you stronger and leaner while providing you with some different mindset perspective. And it
Absolutely.
wasn't, my mindset wasn't earned in an HK with an HK degree, and going to exams in a, in a square box.
Yep.
Mine was earned. Fitness was secondary for me,
Mhm.
right? It was, my other stuff was learned out in the real world, and I think I can really help people there. I think that's what differentiates me from other trainers in
Yeah.
the world. And I mean, that sounds negative, or I'm ripping on other trainers. I'm not. There's so many more educated trainers than me,
Mhm.
but I think I have the full tool belt that was going to help dudes like us, and guys, and as they grow into dudes like us, to get
Mhm.
stronger in every way.
Man, and that's it. It's the classic thing, right? People don't buy training, they buy you,
Right.
right? And that's like people can't buy Tony's experience from me. It just it can't happen. And mind you, with you can train people and right, you take on in your business, as you said, you've had people with you a long time, and that's obviously that's a little different. But if somebody likes you and wants to work with you, they're going to enjoy your training. They're going like if you are aligned and work well together, man, like they'll love your mindset. That's not just like because anybody can lift a fucking barbell, right? It's coaching obviously is it's more nuanced than that, but at the end of the
Yeah.
day, you
But
have
there's so
to
many good coaches, right? But
oh dude,
consistency is the number one
yes.
disclaimer for success. So why do people show up? It's honestly, it's not really versus how you teach a bench press versus how I teach it. It's versus the person that's teaching it.
Yeah. It is, man. It's the buy-in process, I think. And no, it's beautiful, man. Do you have any projects or anything you want to talk about, direct people to that are listening?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of mentioned what we do. The garage gym has remote options, but myself personally, which is like Tango One,
Yep.
that's my brand, the podcast, and then the remote coaching that I do, and there's some in-service camps. We got something coming up in the works soon.
Mhm.
But really just go into my bio, have a look if you're interested in the TAC Life program, which is my strength conditioning and mindset program.
Mhm.
Jump in. We can make it work for anybody who's whether you got just a garage gym with a couple of kettlebells, body weight, or right up to a full gym membership, and make that work for you. And I really love doing that. It's cool. It gets me on calls like this with people from all over the world,
Sure.
and helps me to teaching is growing, man. And like when you teach, you learn so much. Just even having these conversations with you and I right now, this is what it's about, man. I think.
I completely agree. Are you and so you're doing the weekend training stuff still sometimes too then?
I haven't run one in a couple of years, but
Yep.
we're looking to put it back together. There's
Awesome.
a lot that goes into that program. It almost
Sure.
kills me every time. 72 hours. When I keep you guys up for almost the majority of 72 hours, that means I'm awake for almost the whole 72 hours. So we had to rethink that from
Yeah.
how can we make this like investment work for both sides of it.
Mhm.
And it is one of my favorite weekends though. So we're working on how to get that together and how I can balance that with my new I'm pretty much a major league baseball coach these days. So
Wow.
trying to like manage my little league baseball schedule, which is like way more demanding than I ever thought. So
Uh-huh.
trying to work that in. So because we could do these camps in the summer or in the winter, but that sucks. That
Dude.
really sucks. The amount of suck around that is a little bit too high for people to probably pay a lot. So
Yeah.
I like to do them in the summer.
have it at least somewhat palatable because it's still letting people show up.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
man.
If you're too much in pain, you're not really learning as much. You're just surviving, right? It's
Literally,
got
it
to
to
be that
survive.
balance. Got to be that balance of learning versus just trying to live.
Last question for the day. I need some dad advice from Tony Smith. What do you got, man?
Oh, dad advice, man. It's really been a learning curve. But the dad advice is to, oh man, not over coach or teach. Like spend the time to put the lessons, but once they start to move on themselves and like that, like the baseball is just the analogy. Life is more important than baseball, but I'm learning it really on the baseball field. My oldest son is he's coming into his own. He's 11 years old, and when he starts to actually put the things that I coached him on into action, to just let him do, right? And we can talk about it after. And I find that like I'm witnessing on the baseball field, but I'm trying to apply that to life, as he's starting to get a little bit more freedom. And it's like, hey, I got to really rely on the stuff that when he's sitting there with him, he hears, so that when he gets on the field, he puts into play, and take that from the baseball field and move it into life. That's where I'm at right now. And then talk about it again after. We just implemented a thing. I actually took it, the show The Bear. You ever heard the show The Bear? It's like it's a chef show.
Okay.
But I guess the kitchens are super high intense. And the two owners, they do this. So if you can't see me, anybody's listening, it just rub their chest with their fist, like on over their heart.
Yep.
And my son and I have just implemented this on the baseball diamond. It's like, because I'm his coach, it's weird, right? If I'm getting on him too much and it's bothering him and he says, I can't handle this right now, basically, instead of us getting into a fight in front of other players or me continuing or him saying something mouthy to me, he just rubs his chest. And it means like, yo, dad, like I need a minute. Let's talk about this after. And it's like, so not being enough of a dad and being enough of a coach in life, but not overbearing and allowing them to still run that. Like, like you got to know when to pull the chain on the dog and when to let it run. Like you said with your dog.
Yeah, man.
Right. And it's like the dog needs freedom. Right. And so did I. And I'm trying to raise my sons. I'm trying to raise some dogs, man. Some dog mentality in them.
Well, that's the lessons are learned through experience, and you can't curate that experience too much because otherwise you don't learn the lesson.
Absolutely.
Yeah, man.
Absolutely.
No, I appreciate you, Tony. I appreciate everything you're doing out there. It's been neat. Like, obviously, it's been a couple of years since we chatted, but just to watch your growth and even the podcast stuff on your end, the video side, it's been looking crazy good lately, man. It's like just to kind of see that as a fly on the wall from a distance. Like, fuck, it's progressing. He's doing shit over there, man. It's awesome
I
to see.
appreciate that. This message from you kind of came out of nowhere. And it's funny because Instagram and the algorithm, and it's like, oh man, I haven't heard from Bill in a while. And then I'm like, what? I follow this guy. And you had a new Instagram. Like, I'm glad to see that you look great too. You were on the podcast, man, like 100 episodes ago. So we might have to get you back on here, though. We always talked about this real life one. I need you guys in real life.
Dude, I'll come down anytime, man. Summer's the time. I can bring my mic too, whatever. We can set that up for sure.
Be fun. I'm proud of you too. And it's weird, this world, because we talk about Instagram, the algorithm. We don't know each other in any other way, but we've become somehow friends. Which is odd, right?
Yeah. I love finding, and that's one of the things I love about the podcast. One, I talk to people intentionally. So I have an enclosed capsule of time with someone that I otherwise wouldn't. But then two, like a lot of the time, it's the first time I've ever talked to these people. And it's, I have no idea what I'm getting into, and that's part of the fun. And like, I always know them through someone, and like, I'm not worried about how it's going to go, but I don't know anything about their story. So I'm like, okay, I'm learning more perspective, as you mentioned earlier. Like, this is all brand new, and what can I learn from this person, and what's their life been like?
Absolutely, man. I agree. I couldn't agree more. The capsule is the best part. You don't get conversations like this anymore.
No. And that's, I said,
100% dialed in on somebody.
Say it all the time, but we have the power to change the world through conversations, and I just love having them. So I figure if I can have them and I can share them with the listeners that want to listen, I will do that as one method of like, let's just fucking get the perspective out there. Not to say it's the same as therapy, but as you said, the more perspectives you become aware of, the more likely you are to change or expand your own. And I fucking love that.
Awesome, man.
Have a great rest of your day, Tony. Again, thank you for coming on. It's great to see you, man.
You too, brother. Thank you for having me. Take care, everybody.